The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, welcome everybody to the Data Center Energy Management Implementing and Achieving Certification to ISO 50001 webinar. Hopefully everybody has managed to log into the webinar event okay. We've got a number of attendees, so I'll carry on with the agenda. During today's webinar, we will be presenting the findings from a recent research project commissioned in collaboration with the University of Hertfordshire that involves ISO 50001 and data centres in the UK. At the end of the webinar, there'll be a very short 3-question survey where you can indicate if you'd like to receive a copy of the research report. We'll also be looking at the demand for energy management systems, ISO 50001, what it is and how it can benefit your data center efficiency, both commercially and environmentally, implementation of ISO 50001, and the benefits of certification. We're also recording this webinar and a link will be available on our website following the event. I'm Rachel Churchman, your moderator and webinar organiser. If you have any questions you'd like to ask during the webinar, please submit them at the link on the screen during the event and we'll try to answer some of these at the end. Please also email me if you experience any technical difficulties during the event and I'll endeavour to resolve these for you as well. The webinar is brought to you by Blackmores. Blackmores is a consultancy firm which implements and maintains management systems for clients ranging from SMEs up to blue chip organisations. Blackmores were also the first consultancy to implement ISO 50001 in a data centre organisation in Europe. They're also renowned thought leaders for ISO standards and implementation. Blackmores also has an enviable 100% success rate in helping businesses achieve certification. Blackmores cherry-pick aspects of European and international standards to ensure that we meet and exceed stakeholder expectations. This can include elements of health and safety, environmental, business continuity and information security standards amongst others. These are typically essential requirements in the running of a successful data centre. Our presenter today is Melanie Blackmore, Managing Director of Blackmores. Melanie founded Blackmores in 2006. She is the chair of the Chartered Quality Institute Eastern Region, a member of the CQI's Standards Development Group, and has been actively involved with the creation, development and implementation of British and international standards for over 17 years. So what I'll do now is I'll hand you over to Melanie for the main presentation.
Thank you, Rachel. Good morning and thank you for joining us today. Today's agenda will begin with a summary of data center energy management issues and an insight into the importance on energy management systems. This nicely leads on to an overview of the leading energy management standard, ISO 50001. We'll then go on to reviewing how data centers in the UK are managing their energy management in relation to the standard, which has helped us to identify where the main gaps are, the barriers to bridging these gaps, and also look at how some data centers are already reaping the benefits of being certified to ISO 50001. Finally, I'll provide some food for thought regarding the next steps should you wish to embark on the implementation of achieving ISO 50001, including integration with your existing management systems. In today's world, it is almost impossible to discuss any business operation without considering efficiency. In the data center sector, maximising energy efficiency without impacting on reliability should be the goal of virtually every data center's owner or operator. Energy represents one of the most significant operating costs in a data center. Based on current and foreseeable trends, energy consumed by data centers will continue to grow by 12% per year, and may become constrained as global demands rise, making energy use and efficiency a long-term business priority. Consequently, in order to facilitate this energy management drive, a new ISO standard has been developed, ISO 50001, the Energy Management System Standard. In 2011, Blackmores worked with a data center organisation called Equinix Europe to implement ISO 50001 in the UK and the Netherlands. Equinix then became the first in the data center industry to become certified. Blackmores have now recognised that there is a huge potential to help the data center industry to reduce their energy use through the use of ISO 50001. Recognising that there was a need for greater knowledge on the impact of ISO 50001 in the industry, in 2012 we commissioned the University of Hertfordshire to conduct research in this area. We deduced that the key aims and objectives of the research was to better understand the management of energy in the data center sector. To quantify the benefits and identify the barriers to the data center industry of implementing 50001, and to review the importance of an energy management system as a value-adding activity and its role in reducing greenhouse gas emissions and other environmental impacts. It is not surprising that 96% of respondents felt that reducing energy in their data centers was important, with 57% stating it was very important and 39% somewhat important. From our primary research sample, most data centers covered an area less than 50,000 square metres, with 11% between 50,000 and 100,000 square metres. Just over half of the data centres consumed under 5,000 kilowatt hours, with a quarter consuming between 50 to 10,000 kilowatt hours and 11% consuming in excess of 1 million kilowatt hours. It was found that the majority of data centres were using PUE as a metric tool, and 11% used CUE. Interestingly, 11% of the data centres were not using any form of metric tool at all. What I found most interesting was that just over half complied with CRC, but almost a quarter of data centres didn't know about the applicable legal requirements affecting their data centre. So we'll come on to exploring this area in a bit more detail further on in the presentation. Do you know how much you're spending on your energy consumption? Well, data centre usage can generally be divided into two main groups. IT systems, such as hardware and software, and the supporting infrastructure, such as power and cooling systems. Based on the secondary research that the University of Hertfordshire conducted, the main barriers to good energy management was that approximately a third of data centre managers did not have visibility of energy usage. Some found that there was a lack of understanding about the opportunity for energy efficiency. And some viewed a lack of access to capital and a lack of consensus about metric tools and asset rating, and found that that was a barrier. So let's explore how ISO 50001 can potentially provide a solution to these barriers. ISO 50001 is a best practice framework which helps organisations to improve their energy performance and energy efficiency, thus reducing their energy consumption and carbon footprint. So what are the business market drivers? Well, we already saw on one of the previous slides an increase in demand for energy and also the increase in energy prices. So this is going to be one of the drivers in the future because of the risk of the depletion of energy sources and also, of course, the huge overhead cost for data centres in the future. So looking at more resource efficiency measures is one of the key drivers here. Also an increase in legislation and regulations that affect data centres, and also obviously ensuring that we keep our stakeholders happy as they're looking at greening their supply chains. So looking at some of the benefits then, we've found that there's been an improvement in resource efficiency, which has resulted in cost reduction on energy spend, an improvement in legal compliance, simply because organisations can now have a mechanism for identifying legal requirements and putting in measures in place to ensure that the organisation is complying with these legal requirements. Obviously, keeping stakeholders happy by demonstrating a commitment to energy management, and improve security and continuity of supply. Of course, many organisations that are now starting to adopt ISO 50001 are seeing this as a competitive advantage because it's enhancing their reputation as it's demonstrating credibility in this particular area. And of course, at the moment, as far as data centres are concerned, there are very few data centre organisations that are currently certified to 50001, so at the present time it's definitely a unique selling point. So this is the energy management system model from ISO 50001. And for those of you that are familiar with ISO standards, you will recognise that this is based on the Plan, Do, Check, Act model. So first of all, the requirements of the standard stipulate that you have an energy policy, you have a planning, so you're identifying the requirements within your organisation, implementation and operation, the energy management controls, monitoring, measuring and analysing your energy performance. And then also on the checking side of things, it's having effective processes in place to identify any non-conformities and putting in place measures to correct and prevent those issues from reoccurring. Also checking the compliance of the management system as well. So this is generally done through internal audits. And then finally, reviewing the output of the management system. So reviewing the performance of the system, results of your non-conformities and corrective action, etc., and your analysis and performance. And this helps to take a strategic look at the organisation from an energy management point of view, and to then forward plan and to make further improvements. So this basic model, the Plan, Do, Check, Act model, is based on the principles of continual improvement. But I'll come on to explain a little bit more about this in terms of the implementation of these various requirements when we talk about the implementation of the standard. So why choose ISO 50001 as well as ISO 14001? ISO 50001, the energy management standard, does what it says on the can. It focuses solely on energy management. And it helps organisations to demonstrate a commitment to energy management to the stakeholders that matter. The main differentiator between 14 and 50001 is that 50001 requires an energy review, energy baseline and energy performance indicators, as well as procedures for design and the procurement of energy services, products, equipment and energy. And some organisations do question, why should we implement 50,001 if we've got 14,001 in place? And I would agree with some organisations it's not worth it. But for those organisations where energy is the most significant environmental aspect in 14,001, it's definitely worth a look at it, because it makes it so much more focused on resource efficiency and it looks specifically at reducing energy and costs. And this table highlights the main differences between the two standards. So here we've got 50,001 and on the right hand side we've got 14,001. So as you can see, it's been highlighted where the variables are with 50,001, and you'll identify that obviously with 14,001, if you've already got that in place, there is an awful lot of commonality across the two standards. I thought it would also be beneficial to put this into context with the other ISO standards, because we know from our research that many other organisations have other ISO standards in place, such as ISO 9001, ISO 27001, the Information Security Standard, or OSAS 18001, the Health and Safety Standard. So if we put the requirements of 14,001 and 50,001 into context with these other ISO standards, you will see the many common ISO requirements. So we've got management review, internal audits, control of documents and records. So in theory, if you have at least one ISO standard already in place, you should already be partially compliant. So generally speaking, those companies certified to 14,001 should be about 50% compliant to meeting the requirements of 50,001. And those data centres certified to other UCAS certified standards such as 9001 or 27001 will be approximately 30% compliant with the standard. Now we'll look into more detail at some of the key requirements of 50,001 and where the main gaps are in terms of data centres complying with these requirements. This will help you to not only better understand some of the key requirements, but also establish your readiness for achieving 50,001. So according to our research, a quarter of data centres had an energy policy, yet 66% were lacking an energy policy. Now this is a vital ingredient to your energy management system, as this provides direction and commitment to resource efficiency from senior management. Over half of the data centres didn't have appropriate documentation in place, and roughly the same percentage did not review their energy management systems and performance. So it could be said that if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. Okay, so this is slightly concerning, but the good news is that approximately a quarter of the data centres have fulfilled the requirements for documentation, and about a third review their management systems, and approximately a quarter are partly fulfilling this requirement. So other areas deserving close attention in relation to compliance with the standard include monitoring, measurement and analysis of energy performance at intermediate and advanced levels of the data centre operations in order to collect more specific energy consumption information, because this is essential for the creation of the energy profile and the energy baseline. So what we found was that approximately 41% hadn't fulfilled this requirement, and 23% had partly fulfilled it, but 36% hadn't. And that was generally due to the lack of the monitoring, measurement and analysis of the energy performance. And this also is essential to helping data centres in calculating more accurate metric tools and energy performance indicators, which is critical for controlling the achievement of your objectives, targets and action plans. So consequently, the monitoring, measurement and analysis of data could be considered as a starting point for a solid energy management system. Currently, there are over 80 legislative acts that affect data centres in the UK, including health and safety. But for energy management, obviously one of the main ones being CRC, for example. But over the last few years, we've seen a significant growth in voluntary and regulatory codes affecting data centres. According to the Green Grid report in 2012, there are 28 types of energy policies affecting data centres in 12 EMEA countries. Of course, the EC Code of Conduct has been one of the major influences in the sector recently, and this is to become more prominent next year when participation in the EU Code of Conduct will be mandatory for data centres supplying the public sector. Now, at the time of the research being conducted in 2012, only one data centre was certified and one had implemented the requirements of 50001, although many more were considering and working towards the implementation of 50001. But of those data centres that had implemented the requirements of the standard, they found that the main benefits of the implementation was a reduction in energy consumption and GHG emissions, increases in financial profitability, marketing, and improvements in the internal and external organisation's image. So now we'll go on to discuss a few simple steps to implementing ISO 50001. So the first step is the planning stage. Now, first of all, the data centre would need to identify the scope of the energy management system, and also, if you want to become certified, the scope of your certification. Now, there is choice in this matter. You don't have to have your entire organisation certified to ISO 50001. It could be one particular site. Okay? It could be several sites. That's entirely up to you. One of the differences between 14001 and 50001 is you need to include the physical boundaries, so not just the services, but also the physical boundaries, the scope of your certification. The next stage is to conduct a gap analysis to ISO 50001. Now, you can either do this yourself, or you can utilise the services of a consultancy such as ours. But the key purpose of this gap analysis is to identify the strengths and weaknesses of your current operations regarding energy management. Okay, so it's a really useful exercise to see what you've already got in place and where the gaps are, in order to be able to identify the necessary tasks then to go on to implement the standard. This helps you to identify the existing data in relation to your energy aspects. So it's useful to gather as much information as possible, ranging from utility bills through to any existing systems that you currently have in place. So that gap analysis really acts as a catalyst to the entire project, and that really kind of sets the scene. It then helps you to plan what resources that you need to put in place, so together an implementation plan to identify the tasks, the time scales, and the resources that you require. Now, in order to implement this standard, as with any other standard, it's better if there are more people involved, really. I mean, obviously you can champion the project yourself, but I would always advise to gather an energy working group, and this could include members from your environmental group, that would make sense, But really those people that are involved with key processes involving energy management, you really want those key process owners involved. Because at the end of the day, they will then go on to be your eyes and ears in terms of compliance to the standard. And also they know your practices better than anybody else. They'll know where the waste is, and they will know where you can become more resource efficient. So if Blackmores are involved in this process, we facilitate a workshop to gather this team and to prompt them into brainstorming these ideas on energy management within your business, which then helps us to produce an energy review. Okay, so I mentioned earlier on that this is one of the key differentiators from ISO 14001. So you start by planning and looking at your past and present energy uses. So this kind of moves you on from the gap analysis to looking at that in a bit more detail. Looking at the relevant variables affecting significant energy use, and also the company's performance. So the variables could include, looking at different times of year, different data centres, locations, and also taking into consideration, expansion in racking space, for example, if you're looking at expanding your data centre. This then helps us to produce the energy review. So we need to analyse energy use and consumption. We look at identifying areas of significant energy use and consumption, and we identify opportunities for improving energy performance. So the output of this process is to then formulate the energy baseline, the energy performance indicators and objectives, and also the supporting targets and any action plans in order to make sure that you can work towards your objectives and targets effectively. So the next stage then is to document the energy management system. If you've already got ISO 14001 in place, I would always recommend integrating 50001 into that. Likewise, if you've already got 9001 in place, 50001 can also be integrated with your quality management system. I don't see that there's any point in reinventing the wheel. I think if you've already got procedures in place for management review, for example, or internal audits, why have two? It's just duplicating the procedures and paperwork and workload. So where possible, I would always integrate the requirements of the system wherever possible. There's a document called PAS 99, which is quite useful for doing this. PAS is a publicly available specification, and basically that provides you with a framework for integration. But again, that's something that we would generally do with our clients as well, use that as a framework. Okay, so one of the first things that you need to do is to document your legal register. So you need to identify not only the applicable statutory requirements associated with ISO 50001, but also the regulatory requirements, which, as I mentioned earlier, that's increasing quite significantly, and also any other requirements. An example of other requirements could be your landlord's agreement. So whether that stipulates any criteria for energy management. ISO 50001 itself as a standard can be classed as one of those other requirements that your business needs to comply with. Okay, so again, you can have a standalone energy management legal register, or indeed you could combine this as a data center legal register, combining health and safety, your data security legislation, as well as environmental and energy management, of course. Okay, so once you've completed that legal register document, the next thing that you need to do is identify the controls that you need to put in place in order to meet your objectives. So, for example, introducing controls over lamp replacement by replacing it with LED if you're not already using LED. Operating certain equipment if you feel that it's going to help the efficiency of managing that equipment if it's affecting energy control within the business. Okay, so you can have it as few or as many of these controls as you like within your management system. And you then need to document your targets and programs. And then include them as part of a documented energy management system, or indeed a combined integrated management system. Now this provides an example of the structure of a management system. This can actually be applied to any management system. We use this regularly. But this just basically highlights, what the commonalities are between 50001 and the other standards, or if you're looking at implementing an energy management manual. So the first level is actually the manual itself. Now you can have that as a hard copy if you like, but many organisations now will have their system sitting on their intranet or on a server. Quite often you'll have supporting appendices that support certain documents as well, such as the objectives, for example. And the reason for having these in the appendices is that they can change from time to time. So you don't want to keep on updating your manual every month, so you just update your appendices if necessary. At level 3, these are your operation control procedures, and quite often we will produce very simplistic flow charts for these controls because it's essential that those operatives can clearly understand the requirements of those controls and processes. Okay, but again, you can be as descriptive as you like with those. Some organisations prefer to have very detailed work instructions, and they work for businesses as well. Level 4 is the supporting documents that you may need. So templates for your management review agenda and or a corrective action document, for example. Some organisations that are using software, these documents will already be embedded within the systems. But if they're not and you do still use hard copy documents, then there are requirements within the standard to version control those so that they're easily accessible and you're all singing from the same song sheet. And the final level, level 5, these are basically the records that you produce as a result of having the energy management system in place. So, for example, results of your minutes, results of your analysis. So these are key records that you need to retain, and it's up to you how long you retain those records for. Okay, so that's the basic structure for an energy management system. And as you can see, this works well with any other ISO standard. You just integrate the elements of 50001 into each of these levels. So you've created your management system. You put a lot of time and effort into doing that. It's documented. It's been approved by senior management. But there's no point in it sitting on the shelf gathering dust or hidden away on a server somewhere. You need to get it out there. And this is absolutely critical to the success of the implementation of ISO 50001. I can't stress this enough. It's really important that you have effective methods for communicating the requirements of your energy management system to all employees at various levels. So the first stage could be creating training materials. Now you can either create one training course for all employees, which could be a basic introduction to energy management, or if you feel that it's beneficial, you could have training specifically for operatives, if you want to focus particularly on some operational controls, for example, associated with energy management. And you may decide that you want to have separate training for management if they need to know more information about legal compliance, for example, and what their obligations are in running the management system. Okay, so that's entirely up to you. So then obviously you can deliver that energy management awareness training. Now you can either do that in-house, you can do that yourself, or you can outsource that to companies such as Blackmores or certification bodies. We found that e-learning can be really effective, especially for multiple site operations. I think classroom-based training is really effective, but when it's tricky getting shift workers to attend courses, for example, you've got people that are working remotely or in other countries, e-learning can be really helpful. And next month we're going to be launching a new suite of e-learning courses on energy management. The other type of training that you could do is training on 50001. So that could be specifically on the standard itself and auditing. Whatever type of training you deliver and attend, it's important that you keep training records. The reason for this is that when an assessor comes along, it's no good you just saying that everybody is aware of energy management. You need to prove it. So update training records, or if you don't have individual training records, create a training matrix which includes 50001 on there. Now, obviously, it's not just training that you can provide to communicate the energy management system. It's really good if you can have a constant drip feed of information throughout the course of the implementation programme. First of all, an email from the senior management to communicate a commitment to 50001, explain what's going on, why is the organisation implementing this standard, what are the benefits of the data centre, and also to your stakeholders. And also having updates as well as and when you introduce new policies and procedures across the organisation. Another way of doing this is through your regular company news, if you have an internal newsletter, or updates on your intranet site. Again, introducing your own webinar courses as well. If you have a learning management system built in within your systems, they can be added so employees can log on as and when they have the time to do that. Having display screens located across the data centres is also a useful way of communicating messages. Now this could be in a reception area for visitors so that they're aware of your energy management commitment, or some data centres will have screens dotted around inside the data centre so that those people that aren't generally sitting at a desk can view latest news and what's happening within the business. Also having posters and notices in common work areas as well. This can be particularly effective if you're looking at previous energy consumption and highlighting targets. And I think it's really effective if you can have some graphs up to explain exactly what the current performance levels are compared to previous performance levels, and then looking forward to what your future energy performance levels are going to be. So that can be quite motivational. And also, if you want to have it in front of your employees' faces, you can include updates on the PC screensavers. So they're just a few of the methods of communicating your employees' responsibilities and raising awareness of energy management principles, policies and procedures. Okay, so you've communicated the energy management system. Now you need to see whether the system is actually effective. And one way of doing this is through internal audits. Okay. Now, this shouldn't be a tick box exercise. This should be an exercise for you to verify whether the systems have been clearly communicated and understood, and whether employees are complying with processes and policies. Okay. Now, if for some reason they're not complying, it may not necessarily be their fault. It may be that the process isn't good enough. And this is a good opportunity to identify further improvements to your energy management system. Okay? So this can be a really effective way of establishing the levels of compliance, not only to 50001, but your own energy management standards within your business. Obviously, this is a vital ingredient for when you have your external assessment, when the certification body comes along, because they will expect to see evidence of these internal audits being carried out. So you need to have in place an internal audit plan and also examples of internal audit reports for the audits that you've carried out. Okay. Now, I wouldn't be too concerned if you've identified non-conformities during this phase. That's quite normal. In fact, I'd be very surprised if you audited your new energy management system and it was perfect. As with all new management systems in their infancy, there are bound to be certain issues, and so this is a good opportunity for you to test drive your energy management system. And so it's a good thing to raise corrective actions and preventive actions if you feel that that's going to help to improve compliance to the standard in preparation for your assessment. So the final stage is to chair a management review meeting. So this is where you will review all of the various requirements within the standards, such as corrective and preventive action, results of your audits, any changes to legislation, and also an evaluation of your legal compliance as a result of your legal compliance audit. And also looking at how effective your controls have been through looking at monitoring and measurement reports that you've carried out as a result of the various activities on monitoring and measuring your systems. This then enables you to look forward to the next stage to updating and revising your objectives, and to see whether any additional resources may be required, and to look forward in terms of seeing whether any new controls or updates to any controls are required. Okay, so of course this is again based on the method of continual improvement. So you've done it. You've completed the planning phase, the documentation, the awareness training and implementation, and your systems are compliant because you have evidence that they are through your internal audit programme. And you've captured the results of that process in your management review minutes. So the next stage is to actually have the assessment. This is if you want to go for assessment, that is. Some organisations may just want to be compliant to 50001. Assessment isn't for everybody. So if you are looking at going for an assessment, I would recommend booking it a good few months in advance, ideally at least 3 or 4 months in advance. And for those of you that haven't been involved in an assessment before, it's basically broken down into 2 stages. The first stage is a document review. So this is where an assessor will say, can you show me a copy of your energy policy? Because it's a requirement to the standard. So you show them a copy of the policy. It's as simple as that. It's just a document review. Okay. That process generally takes about 1 day. It would definitely take 1 day for one data centre, but it could take longer if it's for a number of data centres. And then, a couple of weeks later, I mean, even a couple of months later, that's up to you, and also the availability of the assessor, they will come back for the stage 2 assessment. Now this is where you need to provide evidence of conformity to what you say you do. So if you have a procedure for training on energy management, that's great, but the assessor will expect to see records of that energy management training taking place. Okay? And that process does take slightly longer than the document review, and that can take a couple of days. But again, that depends on the size of the data centre. But at the end of that process, the assessor will hopefully say to you that you have been successfully recommended for certification to ISO 50001, which is great, but you probably have to wait another couple of weeks for your certificate and for the certification body to go through their due diligence process and to go through all of their various checks before you can actually officially announce that your organisation is certified to ISO 50001. But you can't take your foot off the gas. You need to keep going. Again, it's all about continual improvement. And what I would recommend that you do is to celebrate your success, especially with your stakeholders and prospective clients. You know, to make the most of actually achieving that certification, and also to keep the momentum going internally as well. Okay, so that concludes my presentation on ISO 50001, on the implementation of the standard, and also looking at some of the challenges of implementation and the benefits of implementation. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed the webinar, and I hope that you found that it's informative. And I'd just like to wish you the best of luck with the implementation of your energy management system, and I wish you every success with that. So I'd now like to hand you back over to Rachel Churchman, who I believe may have some questions from our delegates. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Melanie. Yes, well, we have had some questions during the webinar, and also a couple of questions received prior to the event. So if it's okay for you now, Melanie, I'll just share our microphone so that we can both be heard, and we'll just go through some of those questions. One of the the key questions a lot of people wanted to know was how long does it actually take to implement ISO 50001? Perhaps if we can look at two scenarios, the first one being a company already has 14001 in place, and the second one being there's a data centre that currently has no management systems in place.
Right, okay. Well, if we take the scenario of the company that's already got ISO 14001 in place, if we start with the easy one. As I mentioned in one of the slides earlier, that organisation should, in theory, be about 50% of the way there. Okay, which is a good starting point. The framework is in place. You'll have a lot of the mandatory requirements of 50001 already in place, and hopefully developed as a mature system. So I would recommend that obviously carrying out the gap analysis, and it would be achievable to implement the requirements of 50001 within about a month. However, if that organisation is going to go for certification, it is a UCAS requirement that you need to demonstrate 3 months of auditable records, so proof that the system is compliant. UCAS, by the way, is the United Kingdom Accreditation Service. That's the government body which accredits certification bodies, and I would only recommend going with the UCAS accredited certification body. So really you're looking at about 4 months, best case scenario, to implement 50001, and that would be as an integrated management system ideally. Looking at a business that hasn't got anything in place at all and starting from scratch, again it depends on the size of the data centre operations, whether it's a single site whether it's multiple sites, if overseas premises are also to be included within the scope. So scope at that stage is a very important consideration, okay, because obviously it's going to affect not only the time in implementing the standard and an energy management system, but also the cost as far as the certification body is concerned. So I would allow anything from 6 months for a small data centre through to about 12 months. But again, it depends on the number of sites. But hopefully that's provided some kind of idea on the timescales.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. One of the questions we had from one of our delegates is, what is the best way for us to achieve certification for a new retrofit build?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. We actually did this for an organisation a couple of years ago, but that was actually for 27001. The same sort of principles apply. I mean, what you can do is you can create the policies and procedures and the systems and get the documentation together. If you've got new staff that are going to be working in that building, then obviously they need to have training. But unfortunately, you wouldn't be able to actually get certification because you wouldn't be able to prove your evidence of compliance, because if you're not operational at that stage, you can't then provide data, for example, on your energy management. It's very difficult to be able to do an energy review and your baseline as well if you're not operational. So really, you could get a head start by getting everything together, and I guess this is true if you've got an existing management system, an existing 50,001 management system in one site, and you want to expand the scope. The system's already there, but you just need to allow a couple of months to gather evidence of compliance that that system is working at that new site.
Fantastic. Okay, one last question that we've received as well is how ISO 50001 will be helpful in India compared to ISO 14001. So.
Right, okay. Well, I mean, obviously this is, the ISO 50001 rapidly became an ISO from a BS. Basically, a BS is a British standard. It was a British standard called BS 16001, which we implemented for an NHS trust. Well, we've implemented that for a number of different types of companies, like construction companies, for example. But because of the huge demand for energy management standards internationally, it quickly became an ISO standard. So this has obviously now superseded the British standard, and we're seeing a growing interest in 50001 overseas. In fact, we're currently looking at implementing this not only in Europe but in the Middle East as well. So yes, it would be very helpful in India as well. We haven't had any call for our services in that country at this stage, but I know that India are champions of ISO standards. They've got a very, very high number of ISO 9001 certified companies and 14001. So I think that 50001 will quickly be following suit.
Brilliant. Okay, well, just looking at the time, I think we'll have to wrap up the questions and answers there. I'm very sorry if we didn't get the chance to answer your question directly during the webinar, but Mel will be in contact with you after the webinar. Also, if you think of any other questions once you leave, please email us and we'll be in touch. We'd like to ask each of you just to take a few moments longer once the webinar finishes to complete a very short evaluation. Please remember to request a copy of the research report at this point. There will also be an e-learning course available next month, as Mel mentioned during the presentation. So again, just let us know if you want some further information on that. And we'll also be running future webinars. So please indicate on the survey if this is of interest to you, and we'll ensure that we pop an invitation over for you as and when they're planned in. So thank you again for your questions and for your time in attending this webinar. Just remains for Mel and I to wish you an enjoyable rest of your day. Thank you very much.